On the 1,000th day of the ongoing conflict, U.S. President Joe Biden, in a controversial move, authorized Ukraine to use Army tactical missile systems to strike targets within Russian territory. This marked a significant escalation in the war, as Ukraine launched its first known strikes using U.S.-supplied long-range missiles against Russian assets. The missiles targeted a Russian ammunition depot in the Bryansk region. However, Russian air defense systems successfully intercepted 5 of the missiles, minimizing damage and showcasing Russia's advanced anti-missile technology.
Russia has introduced a new missile system that could be impossible to defend against.
Despite Ukrainian claims of success, the limited impact of these strikes highlighted the resilience and preparedness of Russia's defensive infrastructure. In a calculated and strategic countermeasure, Russian President Vladimir Putin unveiled the Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missile, a state-of-the-art weapon designed to maintain Russia's edge in global military capabilities. The Oreshnik's combat debut targeted a military facility in Dnipro, Ukraine, delivering a precise and devastating blow. Putin assured the world that Russia has an ample stockpile of Oreshnik missiles ready for operational use, underscoring the country's preparedness for any escalation. The introduction of Russia's hypersonic Oreshnik missile serves as a stark reminder of the risks associated with NATO's continued involvement in the region. By providing Ukraine with long-range weaponry, the U.S. has, in Russia's view, crossed a dangerous red line, forcing Moscow to respond with decisive measures to safeguard its national interests. Joe Biden made a contentious decision that marked a significant escalation in the war, sparking intense debate over the motives and timing of such a move. This decision stands in sharp contrast to the atmosphere of optimism sparked by Donald J. Trump's historic political comeback. Trump's campaign was characterized by powerful and direct promises, none more striking than his pledge to end the Russia-Ukraine war within 24 hours. This ambitious claim seemed to resonate not only domestically but also internationally, as both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky publicly expressed their willingness to engage in peace talks. However, it appears that President Biden has a different vision. To fully understand the complexities of the situation, it is crucial to examine the origins of the conflict. On February 24, 2022, Vladimir Putin announced a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Under what he referred to as a special military operation, Russian forces launched assaults by land, sea, and air, targeting Ukrainian cities and military assets from multiple fronts: Russia, Belarus, and Crimea. In a speech broadcast minutes before the invasion began, Putin declared that the operation aimed to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, while addressing what he claimed to be the genocide of ethnic Russians in Ukrainian territories. Putin said there were neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and he was pointing directly at the far-right nationalist groups within Ukraine, particularly those with paramilitary roots, like the Azov Battalion. To Putin, these groups symbolized what he portrayed as a threat to ethnic Russians and a hostile ideology near Russia's border. The roots of Putin's rationale, however, extend far beyond these immediate objectives. Putin has long emphasized the shared historical and cultural ties between Russia and Ukraine. The story of Ukraine and Russia's ties spans 1,000 years, beginning in the 9th century with the Kievan Rus, a powerful Slavic state centered in Kyiv, known as the mother of Russian cities. This early kingdom laid the cultural and religious foundations for Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. However, after the Mongol invasions in the 13th century, the Kievan Rus fractured and Ukraine's lands eventually fell under Polish, Lithuanian, and Ottoman rule. By 1654, Ukraine allied with Tsarist Russia through the Treaty of Pereyaslav, seeking protection, yet this marked the start of Russian influence over Ukraine. Catherine the Great intensified this in the late 18th century by adding vast Ukrainian territories, including Crimea, tying Ukraine tightly into the Russian Empire. In 1917, following the Russian Revolution, Ukraine briefly declared independence, but was swiftly brought into the Soviet fold, becoming one of the founding members of the USSR in 1922. Soviet rule brought both industrial growth and deep suffering. With the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, Ukraine seized the moment, voting overwhelmingly, over 90%, for independence in a historic referendum. Grasping the deep history between Ukraine and Russia, you begin to see Putin's perspective, a vision rooted in centuries of shared origins, empires, and shifting borders. To Putin, these ties have fused Russia and Ukraine in a way he sees as unbreakable, binding Ukraine's path by both history and heritage. These one-people narratives reflect a broader ambition to keep Ukraine within Russia's sphere of influence, particularly in light of NATO's continued expansion toward Eastern Europe. Although Ukraine is not a NATO member, its burgeoning relationship with NATO has been seen by Russia as unacceptable. As Putin put it, Ukraine's westward shift simply is not going to happen. Russia's opposition to NATO's eastward expansion is rooted in a historical grievance tied to the assurances given at the end of the Cold War. During the pivotal negotiations over Germany's reunification in 1990, Western leaders, including then U.S. Secretary of State James Baker, assured Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward beyond Germany. However, since that time, NATO has grown to include 14 additional member countries in Eastern Europe, significantly extending its presence into the region. And then there was the pivotal moment in 2014. In February of that year, amid the widespread Euromaidan protests, Ukraine's pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted and subsequently fled to Russia. Within days, unidentified forces, later acknowledged to be Russian soldiers operating under Putin's orders, began seizing strategic sites across Crimea. This maneuver set the stage for a controversial referendum in which a majority of voters in Crimea reportedly chose to break from Ukraine and join Russia. The swift realignment of Crimea was soon followed by pro-Russian separatists in the eastern Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, declaring independence. These declarations ignited what became the Donbas War. Mediation efforts through the Minsk Protocols, initiated by the OSCE along with France and Germany, resulted in temporary ceasefires but ultimately failed to secure lasting peace. As the conflict dragged on, the landscape of international involvement began to shift, with NATO and Western nations growing increasingly supportive of Ukraine. Now, Trump's assertion that he could bring about peace resonates with Putin's conditional openness to negotiations. President Trump on numerous occasions has confidently stated he would bring an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Putin responded with optimism during the BRICS summit in Kazan, saying, "Yeah, I think he is being sincere," and adding, "Of course we welcome statements like this, whoever they come from." Trump's approach to U.S. involvement in Ukraine reflects a growing sentiment among Americans about the priorities of foreign aid. He questions whether investing in Ukraine at this scale truly serves America's core interests, especially given the domestic challenges that demand attention. Since the onset of the war, U.S. Congress has allocated substantial aid to Ukraine, $175 billion as of April 2024. His stance taps into a broader debate over whether U.S. tax dollars should be directed toward international conflicts, or whether those funds would be better invested in addressing pressing issues within the country's own borders. If there's anyone capable of breaking through to Putin, it's Trump, whose connection with the Russian president is as unconventional as it is powerful. Right from their first encounter, Trump and Putin seemed to connect on a different wavelength, striking up a rapport that was both unexpected and intriguing. Their interactions exuded a mutual respect and an almost instinctive understanding, as if they recognized a like-minded audacity in each other. If there's anyone who could make waves in this war, it's Trump. Vladimir Putin said conditions for peace talks are simple, beginning with the total withdrawal of Ukraine's troops from the entire territory of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia regions. As soon as they declare in Kyiv that they are ready for such a decision, and begin the real withdrawal of troops from these regions and also officially notify about the abandonment of plans to join NATO, our side will immediately, at the same minute, make the order to cease fire and begin negotiations, he said. Trump may not be able to end the war directly as Putin's demands remain highly controversial, but he could potentially shift the course of the conflict indirectly. Scaling back U.S. support for Ukrainian move he is likely to pursue could send shockwaves across the geopolitical landscape. Such a decision might inspire other